I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Richard Ball from PDM, who's followed from first to be with us. And well, Richard, all of you. Thanks a lot.
So thanks for the invitation. It's really nice to be here. We had some really good chats earlier, Paul and Claire, about some various things that we might pick up on later. But it's nice, and I'll briefly start with. Not good. Try it again.
Oh, it's a bit like my mind.
Have some.
It's gonna work.
I'll find this in you.
I'm keeping it honestly.
Bit of a tap dance.
You don't want to see me tap dancing seriously. Maybe later on. There we go. So I thought I'd start off as to kind of why I'm here and doing this talk today. First aspect is I left school at 16 and did an engineering apprenticeship. I think apprenticeships have had a hard time, but I think we're coming back now, which is great to see. Got a degree in industrial design at Teesside with my learning colleague. So shout out to the Teessiders up there. 30 years in industry. 18 years running a product design innovation consultancy in first. Probably 75% of what we do is medical devices and life sciences. I've got an MSc in senior leadership, so I'm going to talk briefly about leadership towards the end of this kind of presentation. And lots of work outside of running the business. So I do a lot of work for Innovate UK, and I've done some work for Design Council, various kind of initiatives, just to keep me kind of busy. But so speaking from experience, got bruises, sweat, tears, guts, all the rest of it. So when we got this kind of subject title, how designers are leading the way in tackling world-changing issues, it's quite a big subject. So I spent a bit of time kind of reflecting on what that actually means. So I listed down a few things. So societal, equality, diversity, inclusivity, neurodiversity and racism. I've got 3 children. My youngest child has got autism. So I think that's something that's really kind of interesting over the last kind of 10 years where neurodiversity has become accepted. And you were talking earlier, Claire and Paul, about my first child was IVF and mental health issues. So I think it's really great that as a society, we're doing some really good stuff and talking about important things. Things like racism, etc., are still there, which is pretty abhorrent when you think about it. Technology, managing good outcomes. Just because you can, it doesn't mean that you should. So we had a really interesting conversation earlier, again, Paul and Claire, about tech and how tech can actually enable us to do things. But it really being a holistic approach, which is something else we spoke about really. Political. I just wrote these like 2 minutes ago. Political balance of power. I mean, I really don't know what's going on with the government at the moment. You know, Kwasi Kwarteng's on a plane coming back from the US right now to try and sort out this kind of storm that we're in, which is just, I find it amazing, really. Insecurity, immigration, famine. We shouldn't be seeing people jumping on boats from France, you know, in their thousands trying to get to the UK. So I'm not saying design is the solution, but these are societal big problems that we need to think about. Environment, consumerism and climate crisis. So Paul's going to talk about this, got a great presentation on this. Disparity. So I think there is a misunderstanding about the environment and circular economy for the work that we've done. People think you can be not sustainable and then sustainable, but I think it's more incremental. So I think there's a bit of work in terms of educating people in terms of what that theme is all about. And how do we actually achieve things? So there's lots of things been going on when Boris was in power, lots of initiatives, 2030, 2050. So there's lots of motivation, and then we see these COP events, but nothing seems to really happen at the end of them. So great kind of talk, but we need to see some kind of actions. So it's how we achieve that. And then health, equality, inequality, mental health, second-class health system. I think with COVID, excuse the pun, there's been some positives out of COVID in terms of telehealth. So there've been lots of previous attempts before COVID. Oh, hang on. I will stop tap dancing. So there was attempts pre-COVID of telehealth and using technology to. I'll carry on talking. So lots of technology to enable people to have point of care help and diagnostics and things. And I think the good thing out of COVID is that it's enabled to change that behaviour of people actually having a consultation via Zoom and not physically in front of the clinician. However, I think that is going to potentially create a second-class health system if we're not careful, because as technology is advancing, you know, there's companies around using mobile phones, smartphones, and the camera to detect vital signs. So you don't need to tell your doctor you don't feel very well. The vital signs on the app will know what your kind of condition actually is. I think that's great, but the problem is we're going to create, if we're not careful, a second-class health system for those people that can't afford the technology, that can't access that. So that's kind of a bigger picture. And then now we've got the cost of living crisis, eat or eat, interest rates, inflation, healthy aging, which I mentioned at the top of social housing, inflation, and war. So when I wrote this, I got really depressed, and I thought, so how can I create something which is kind of upbeat on a Friday in Newcastle? So I'm choosing two themes today. I'm going to kind of run through them. The first one is an explicit design challenge that we did as a business, which we've done here and now. And the other one is something I think as designers we should be doing in a strategic way. So the first one is global health. So United Nations and World Health Organization, they're global guardians of global health. It's on number 3 of the UN's mission. So this is about a collaboration with the University of Leeds, NAMC, which is a medical college in Delhi. It's a medical teaching college in Delhi, and XLO, who are a manufacturer of medical devices in Delhi. And this was all about laparoscopy and how to bring laparoscopy from the developed world into LMICs. And it was all about design being the driver of that change. So I'll talk about the context. So lap surgery, or otherwise known as keyhole surgery, can be used for a variety of procedures, not just for the abdomen. It can be used for knee surgery, for example. But in the case of the abdomen is insufflated, so you use CO2 to kind of blow up the tummy, so that you can get ports in the keyhole. So I've got my own demonstration here for an insulated abdomen. And it's used for, you know, kind of various procedures. But the really good thing about lap surgery is that the recovery rate is very high because there's much less risk of infection. So it's a very safe surgery. It's successful. It's been around for kind of 30, 40 years. And it's, you know, last 10, 20 years have been performed by robots. So it's a very well-known, precise, mature technology. However, the health inequality here, where the kind of design aspect comes in, is that in rural India, apart from the wealthy, there's no real healthcare system. So because it requires CO2 to insufflate the abdomen, that's in scarce commodity in rural India. It's just not something you can get hold of. So that therefore precludes the opportunity for a patient to benefit from that surgery. And what we wanted to do was look at how we can kind of translate that from the Western world into developed countries. So we work with a surgical team in India, and what we found was that if you carry out the clinicians do this, if you have a spinal block which kind of paralyzes you from the shoulders down, and you use a mechanical lift into the umbilicus, which is effectively the tummy button, you can create what is called tenting. So it lifts the abdomen up and kind of creates a tenting. So it's kind of the same as lap surgery, but not as expensive, nowhere near as expensive. But the reality here is that if in rural India, if you are a father, for example, who is working to feed the family, the default position at the moment, or as was in India, if you've got abdominal surgery, it's normally open. The problem with open surgery is that the recovery rate is far longer, the risk of infection is far higher, the morbidity rate is far higher. So it's not a great thing to have if you're in rural India. But if you are a father of a family. If you can't work, you can't feed your family. It's kind of his role as that. Unless you, I'll just say next slide or something like yeah, that's the next one. So the design challenge was really low cost surgery in laparoscopy. So spinal block, corkscrew through the umbilicus, which causes tenting. Sorry. Then the other design challenge was it's got to be less than $60 to manufacture. So we've adopted frugal innovation, which is a kind of design technique. Less than 15 kilograms in terms of weight. You have to be collapsible. It had to fit into a flash autoclave, and it had to be used by one clinician in rural India. So these kind of situations are in Nepal, for example, where there is one surgeon who goes to a pop-up kind of surgical tent and does the procedure. So it's really one person who can do it. But it's got to be user-centered. So it's the power of design that can kind of bring all of this together. Still long. No. I'm not clicking now. Okay. So here are some slides about the development that we did. We did several trips out to India. The first one was kind of fact finding in Bangalore. So talking to lots of rural surgeons about their environment and what they have to deal with, and that's where the 15 kilograms came from, because they have to do an internal flight for it to put it on the aircraft. The flash autoclave, so in pop-up tents in rural India, flash autoclave is about 400 mil diameter. It's all the parts got to fit into that basically. And that insight of going out to India, the initial insight in Bangalore was to kind of gather the information. And then we went back out to Mumbai and Delhi, went out several times, and we used our design expertise and the insight of talking to people, lots of conversations to do some initial kind of development, and then going back and kind of iterating, doing some cadaveric trials in India, and then do some more development work. So effectively, we kind of had a really good team on this project, from clinicians to academics to engineers to manufacturers to us, and we were kind of the glue that held it all together, because the design was the thing that had to push it forward. So we didn't want to get sidetracked by it being an academic piece of work that we had to do with load cells and manufacturing tolerances. It was really about creating a solution. And this thing is not going to win any Red Dot Design Awards by any means, but it was adopting frugal innovation to create a solution. Sorry, we're getting there. So top left, this is Millie talking to rural surgeons. These guys work in Nepal. Just lots and lots of listening and lots of kind of engaging with those guys. This top middle is looking at the corkscrew. So it's literally a corkscrew that goes into the umbilicus and creates this kind of lifting function. So talking about early stage kind of ideas and thoughts. And then this is us scrubbed up in Delhi, going to theatre, trying out the early stages of the device. And then this is with the surgical team. So looking at ways to make it collapsible that still gives, still manages to give that lifting capacity. The complication we had is that it's a mechanical lift, but in rural India, the beds, the surgical beds are all different, and the ones that are different, some of them are kind of broken. So we had to work along a theme where we could create a device that was agnostic to whatever the surgical kind of bed was. 3D print as usual, and then that's engaging with the manufacturer. So when we work on projects, we like to bring the manufacturer in pretty early on, because they're going to help us inform the design. I'm going to click. Yeah. So this is the design solution. frugal innovation. It's not going to win any red dots, but it was low cost, less than $60 US, less than 15 kilograms, collapsible, fits into flash autoclave, and can be used by the surgeon in theatre. So did lots and lots of trials to demonstrate the efficacy. So the positive impact in terms of design was concept development, engineering, prototypes, cadaveric trials, clinical stakeholder engagement, collaboration with the Indian manufacturer. We got it through CE marking, so CE mark, and it's being used in rural India right now. So it's kind of humbling to think that, you know, the design firm in First has kind of created a low cost lab device, which is probably being used now in Nepal. So kind of talking about this project and why it was successful and kind of bringing it back to the design impact. I think part of it was that we had the right team. So fostering the right team is really important. We'll all know that projects can sing or not, depending on the team that you've got that's working with you on this thing. A good organisation structure, so we all knew where we sit in terms of the organisation. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities. So, you know, fundamental aspect. Egos will happen though, so I don't know if anybody's worked with surgeons here, but they've got quite pretty big egos. And you need to kind of manage that. A shared vision, really important. We were determined to get this from concept to CE marking and be used in India. We were all determined to do it. Respect for all stakeholders. And then permission to challenge is really important. You know, we fostered this kind of culture where we innovated, but it was okay to challenge in a very constructive way. And I think that's what got it from concept to CE mark. But ultimately, you know, the design authority was at the core. And if that wasn't at the core, we wouldn't have a good solution. We would have gone off on different tangents. So I would argue, Terry, that this was a driver of change. The design was a driver of change. The next step on this project is we're going out to Uganda early next year to translate what we've done in India to rural Africa. We've got certain teams out there ready to take it on board. So this is my second part of my presentation. Design for change strategically to tackle world-changing issues. So this is where I think as designers we've got a really important role to play. So opportunities for change, again, Paul and Claire spoke earlier about, you know, we've got the fourth industrial revolution coming down the tracks pretty quickly. There's lots of things that are out there that can be used to enable technology and purpose. So, you know, robotics, AI, decarbonisation, photonics, wearables, health tech, digital. So I would argue that there is some really good opportunities, but it's got to be informed by design and impact to make that really impactful change. So what I want to talk about is kind of leadership in design. So I've got a master's in leadership, and this is something that I'm really kind of passionate about, kind of mixing my design background with leadership and kind of matching those two things up and seeing kind of where it takes us. So, you know, we've known for years there's been some misconception about what design is, and some people still see it as an activity that you do at the end of a project. A lot of people are really need to be educated in terms of the value of design as a kind of holistic approach. And I think we're getting there in some respects. I think the balance is changing, you know, where people who are non-design understand the value of it. I think we've got a lot of work to do. So, you know, some examples, you know, UX, design thinking. So, you know, looking at the implications end to end. So not just the design of a product by no means, but this whole process, designing the process of that user insight, right from, you know, engaging with the user right through to manufacturing distribution. So I think design is getting more exposed to and is appreciated in terms of what value it can bring to that whole kind of process. But I think that designers need to be at the start of the party. So this isn't designing stuff, this is actually being involved in the kind of bigger picture. So if you Google leadership, you'll see a million different types of leadership styles. So I'm going to touch briefly on some of these. And I'll kind of characterize them as well, and you might be able to see which kind of leadership style you've got. So transformative leadership. So the designer is the change agent, forward-looking, visionary, radical, and brave. Directive leadership. The designer sets firm boundaries, fearless, resilient to reach ambitions. Proactive leadership is the designer creates an active to represent themselves, does not ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later. That's probably you, Dave, I think. Intuitive leadership. The designer builds on previous experience and navigates a complex environment. In the incubation phase, it may be possible to create without the need for data. Adopt storytelling for leverage. So in my leadership kind of journey, storytelling is really important. If you want to use your skills as a designer, being able to tell stories is that's where we can mobilize change, I think. Holistic leadership. The designer focuses on the main topics and not getting distracted by the detail, applies understanding of the current state and the overarching vision of the future state. So I guess my point here is that, although I said think about what your leadership style is, I think as designers, as we start to move towards the start of the party, then I think we need to understand and think about the leadership style which we adopt. So if you're working with a team on something transformative and the team's got big egos, you need to manage that somehow, manage that kind of culture. Because as I said earlier, we've all worked on projects that have been ego driven, and it's how as designers we manage that. And I do think that leadership in design is a really important aspect. So I think it's my final slide. Leadership in design, a driver of change. So I think we need to be at the start of the initiatives, and it sounds like design is at the core of the stuff that you're doing. Holistic thinkers. So I think we're very good at thinking, engineers think about kind of one specific thing. As the designers, our asset is that we can think holistically and very good at divergent thinking, which is a major benefit. Adding value, by the process of kind of thinking sideways, we can add value, and that value might be looking at failing ideas fast or looking at other opportunities. Horizon scanners, I spend a lot of time horizon scanning in definition of within the realms of possibility. So I'm really interested in tech. What's out? I'm not a techie, but I'm interested in tech. What's out there? What's going on? What's the industrial revolution? How can we use it? What's useful? What's not useful? How do we inform change? As I say, just because you can, it doesn't mean that you should. So I think as designers, we've got a role to play in that change of making sure that we inform, because it's all about user insight. And I think the more we can get to the start of that party, the better. Challenging assumptions. It's always great to, as a designer, obviously we are portals. We gather information, we collect the data, we disseminate the data, and we design systems, products or processes accordingly. So an example of was the proven innovation. As I say, we won't win any Red Dot Design Award, but it completely was fit for purpose. So we've got to be agile and chameleon-like. Mobilising teams, I think designers need to get to the start of the party and mobilise people, because I think we've got the assets to do that. We might not be, technological geniuses, but I think we've got the assets to get teams of people together and show them the way. Innovation management, I hate that word now, innovation, but that's kind of where it's at. There's lots of opportunities ahead of us, and I think it's how we manage those processes. Being empathetic. We're very good at designers with empathy, understanding people's perceptions and point of view, and being able to kind of act on those. Change management, when we work with clients and teams, changing people's behaviour is really difficult. So we need to understand and learn those characteristics of how we actually change the state from one to another. Aware of risk, every project that is R&D, product design is full of risk, and it's how we think about and manage that. And then adopting the appropriate approach. So we've got to be chameleons. We've got to understand the technology, what's useful, what's not useful, how we apply it, how we robustly challenge it, how we challenge assumptions. So being really robust in our approach. And then I think being brave, I think that we need to, as designers, get to the head of that party, I think we need to educate people in terms of what the role of design brings holistically and not necessarily prescriptive. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, that, Richard. Anyone have any questions, comments, points? Zoomers, if you do have, if you want to ask anything, if you just wave, and I'll invite you to ask your question or make your point. Oh, actually, we've got. Who is that? So is there a question from one of your guys, Matt?
Yeah, I'm hoping we have a couple. We've actually got a lot of.
Just getting the sound on. Just give me a second.
No worries.
So can we unmute? Matt, do you want to put it? We're struggling with the sound a bit here. Do you want to put it in the chat? And
Yeah.
then I'll read it out to Richard. Is that all right? Sorry.
Uh,
Anyone in the?
How long did it take for the rural, the India project? How long did it take from initial, we need X to getting C marked and in use?
2 years. Pretty quickly.
It's quite good, isn't it? Exactly.
Yeah, no, with the way that we kind of, you know, it was a collaboration, but we knew that design would be the driver. And we did a fair bit of storytelling to get people on board. So what good looks like is this simply see more from somebody in the pool using this. We've had loads of interest, you know, we went out, the MC wanted to talk to us, and it's been in the Times of India, with various kind of publications. We've got lots of kind of publications around it and patents and stuff for 2 years. That was really putting the foot on the gas.
Yeah.
But everybody was completely on board with it, you know. It could have easily failed, spectacularly failed, but I think that's down to the passion of the team and the culture. And
Do you think then that transferring that to Africa will be a quicker process or about the same time, given that you've got the?
so we've got the device at CE mark being manufactured in Delhi. So the device is there. We've warmed up some clinicians in Uganda, so they're ready to take it on. I think it's the same thing again. It's really demonstrating them with the clinical utility of it, and then sending over samples. Probably what we will be doing in Uganda is doing some cadaver trials, because there's a training theme around this. So although part of this, in addition to what we did, there was a surgical team from the teaching hospitals was deployed at the same time as us, and they were teaching the rural surgeons lap surgery with box trainers. So they were kind of learning how to pick up, I mean, I still don't know how to do it, but with no, we're using it. You've got you've got 3 ports, you've got a camera, you look at the camera and you are articulating here to move, to literally suture. When you think, so they learned those skills as we did the device. So I think it'll be slightly quicker, but we've got to go through that stakeholder engagement kind of trials to kind of get big. So I think it'll be.
David Lear from Snowbird. Compared to a conversion program, so if you did that for, I don't know the next lap surgery, like say strike out something like that. How long would it take and how much would it cost versus? One question, what the overall budget for that this project was?
Yeah, so if it was strike, it would have been 5 years minimum. I think part of that is because the regulatory pathway in the UK is far more onerous than India. It's changed in the UK, it's changed from MDD to MDR, so it's just far more difficult to get products. Plus, Stryker, for example, are a great company, but they're a big organisation. So I think part of the reason why we got it done in 2 years was being agile, and I think that I would say the impact was we were all a small team, but it was direct kind of costs. In terms of a cost, 20-30 times more expensive than Stryker, if not more.
Interesting.
That's good. Matt, do you want to try again? I've turned the sound up. Let's see if we can hear it this time.
Can you hear us now? Is that working? Hello.
Who's fine?
No, sorry.
Silent.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure why it's not coming through. But we'll Yeah, they're not on mute, but there's just no sound coming through.
be in the chat area, there's a load of chat.
Yeah, I'll do that. Sorry, Matt, we'll try again later. Thanks.
All right.
Paul, you had a question.
Yeah, who were the funders, how do you sell their ideas? National Institute of Health Research were the funders, Global Health. They were the funders, so it was, we applied for that bid, which took about 18 months. What was the other part of the question, sir? How did you sell the ideas? Who? How? Who? What, the clinical team or NHR or?
No, I mean, funders need a story, don't they?
Oh, so it was really to do with the metrics of lap surgery in the UK, the high morbidity in India, and lap surgery versus open being a very direct correlation in terms of health economics. So it was a very kind of obvious, interestingly, we're just talking to NAHR about actually whether gasless lap surgery could be used in developed countries. But we've got loads of work to do in terms of demonstrating efficacy. But yeah, it was a very clear cut kind of rationale behind it as to why.
Something's radar is the problem.
Oh, I think it's been on radar for 20 years, but nothing's really been. It was really due to the spinal block and this concept of tenting that kind of gave the insight as to actually this actually could work, and that was the kind of instigator for it.
Thanks, Paul. Julie, you had the last one.
Hi, Julie from Octor Design. I know you guys have been around a long time, and this is quite a broad question, so
Yeah.
apologies. But we're talking about designers and change.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest change that you've driven within PDM to get you where you are now? How have you changed the business in the big way?
Yeah. So
Good question.
yeah, so I started out in 2000. So my background, I started in 1986, engineering apprenticeship program. Started in 2005 because my background is engineering. I've got a degree in industrial design at Teesside. Big hands up again. But what I found is I had the skills of the engineering and working on the shop floor and understanding manufacturing principles, but also that design aspect. And I was kind of interested in not doing the front end design or the back end design, but kind of doing all of it. Because my experience was that, I could do all of it. So that's kind of how it set out. But we started off being product designers. The problem with being product design, people come to us with a brief and they expect us to get a brief and run with it. And as the years progressed pretty rapidly from 2005, it was apparent that I'm reading a really good book on this actually at the moment, but it's apparent that the clients didn't really have a clear brief. So we ended up challenging clients with their brief and challenging their bias. And then we ended up not designing products, but rolling back to research and insights and observational. So, user insights, and we've been banging the drum for a very long time. When we start a project with a client, we'll say, we're going to try and kill your idea. And we want to talk to people that you don't know. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, and it's kind of moved from that to being very focused on the front end. If you get the front end right, then the back end will just kind of flushes through. The design, the reality is that the design, the prescriptive act of designing is very easy. It's all about getting the insights. But we really drill down. I'm at Great Ormond Street on Thursday with our clinical team, and I think we'll be disrupting a certain technology, because I think that, and that this is the real power of design. We've got a license to ask really stupid questions, but sometimes those stupid questions can get really good. But more recently, I'm interested in leadership. I'm interested in how leadership and design mash up and how it informs good outcomes. So not designing anything. So thinking about, I think the smartphone thing is great, where there's tech in Singapore developing technology where the smartphone can measure vital signs. But then I'm thinking, well, that's great. We're going to have a second class health system, and how do we manage that? All these things. They actually really bother me. More prescriptive stuff like my youngest is autistic, and I think the healthcare system the education system for autistic kids is completely nowhere near where it should be. So I'm kind of interested in these big challenges, because I do genuinely think that design has got a real
I agree.
important part to play. But I think we've got as designers, we've got a real obligation to inform communities of what design is. And that's been around for years, like, oh, you know, you design stuff well like this, you know. So I think design thing in the UX is all coming, but we just need to keep banging on that drum, I think.
Thank you.
Designing is easy, designing the right thing is that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much again. This will be around for a little while. A copy afterwards, if anyone wants to have a chat with them
Yeah.
about anything in particular.
Yeah, I'll have to chat to anybody afterwards, you know, I'll be here for a while.
Great, thanks, Richard. Right, I'm now delighted to, as you can see here, welcome Angela. Those of you who are regulars will know that probably from April onwards, I put a slide up about the highlight of the year, the Innovation Festival, because it is so good. And if any of you are going to admit to not having been, then I'm surely not, but you never know. And one of the key people behind that is Angela. So,
Thank you. I'm absolutely terrified of this now.
that's the human bit that doesn't work. I mean,
It works. Okay, so as Terry said, I'm Angela Costa, Head of Innovation at Northumbria Water. I have probably one of the best jobs out there. It might seem actually pretty dull working for the Water Board, but actually, once I've finished today, you'll realise that actually it is a thrilling place to work, and none more so than at the moment if you've been reading the headlines over the summer. So as head of innovation, I know you don't like that word, and do you know what? Now that I was an innovation manager at Innovations of the Network, and after the second innovation, like people were asleep, and even my mum still says to me, "Actually, what is it that you do?" I mean, it's like a really funny thing. But for those of us who actually have to live the dream, it is really important we have a really clear definition within our business, so then we can do it right, so we can engage the right people and make people understand in terms of what's needed. So for Northumbria Water, we have a very, very ambitious goal in that we want to be leading in innovation in the water sector and beyond, which is no mean feat. I came in my previous life, I'm a PhD chemist who did 17 years at Procter & Gamble, who were absolutely brilliant at open innovation. And the word fast did not convince me into the water sector. It is a much slower paced business, but we're changing that slowly, and we are definitely changing it at pace because we definitely need to. So what is it for us? It is a new idea, a new product, or a new service, or a method. It is for everybody in the business. We have a very, very small team in the innovation team, but actually we need everybody in the business to innovate, to make an impact. And what we want to help people understand is that we need all sorts of skills. So people might think, oh, I'm not an innovator, but actually everybody is in some form, and we're trying to help people get on that journey and be part of the difference that we all can make. I used to have on the slide, not inventors in sheds, but I have changed that. I have now not just inventors in sheds, because we have amazing practical people in the business who will see a problem, will go home into their shed or into their garage, and they'll actually make a solution, and they'll bring it into work and do it. We also work, and we have through these events, I've met people who we now work with who indeed are these brilliant inventor types who can actually see the world in a different way and actually help us come up with solutions. And as I said, it's actually not just for a few people like me, it's actually for everybody in our organisation to be part of this journey. And when I started at Northumbria Water, it was really, really key that we also had structures and processes in place, which is like all of the really boring stuff. For anybody who knows the innovation side, I'm like at the really excitable, messy front end, and the process and actually doing it is the bit that I'm probably less keen on. But we actually need something that actually runs through the entirety of the business. And probably the best thing that I got given was our business plan when I started the job, because it was really clear that the really big objectives that the businesses set out for themselves and the really hard objectives that our regulators set for us were nowhere near possible if we do things as we do today, and we need a change. And innovation can be the driver of that change within our business. So I had to set up processes and a pipeline and make it all really clear, really transparent. So it wasn't just like some skunk works that people were working on as a pet project, you know, like in their spare time, but actually time was given to people and there was a really clear process. But people actually is the big thing. I'm going to come on to that one next. And then the other one that I put in, which I think is really, really important, is passion. Because if you don't have passion for what you're doing, certainly something like innovation, that is actually really difficult. You have to persuade people. There are hurdles and obstacles trying to stop you doing what you're doing. And you need to have passion in order to get over those. So very, very important. But why are we doing this? And this, I guess, is the really big bit for me, and the bit that makes my job really exciting, is that at the moment we have some ginormous challenges that we need to fix. So climate change, we're obviously going to be a part of fixing that. But what this is we are the first people that are getting the brunt of this. So if you look back to last November when we all had Storm Arwen, absolutely caused chaos. And we've had storms before, but this one actually tripped us up in ways, because every time we have a storm, we learn about it, we try and make ourselves more resilient. But this one actually tripped up the energy people, and then without energy at our sites, we now have a really big problem. So it is these experiences that we are constantly learning from, and we really need to make sure that our products and our services are reliable and resilient for the future, because nobody wants to turn on their tap and nothing happen, or indeed the other stuff that is just unthinkable. So the other thing that's happened, obviously this summer, we've had very, very dry conditions. We have enough water because we do a lot of planning, a lot of long-term planning to make sure that this is the case. But it does mean that, that when we have these dry periods of time, we need to work with our customers in order to be able to use the water responsibly. So it's like a joint responsibility, but a lot going on in that space that we need to be on top of. Aging infrastructure, this is an exciting one, because we've got everything from Roman to modern day, and probably more kind of like down the aging bit. And we need to look after this. It's really, really important that we actually keep all of our works running as they should do. We also have over 60,000 kilometers of pipe work to manage. And there's all sorts of things going on that make it an incredibly difficult process to manage. But again, technology is out there, design is out there. So we have a great opportunity to really look after the infrastructure that we have, and indeed design new infrastructure that is sympathetic to the environment, that is in tune with net zero, in tune with circular. So we have a lot of work going on in that space. Increased demand. So the pandemic hit. We've done really, really well getting people to conserve water, to use it really responsibly. And then the NHS told everybody to wash their hands, that we were all doing until they were red raw. So it probably wasn't very appropriate at that time that told people to not use water. We then had beautiful weather, so out came the paddling pools, the hot tubs multiplied out of control. People started gardening, so you can see, you know, like we were in a little bit of a different place with increasing demand. We also have a diminishing resource. We're lucky here, everything to Kielder, lots of our lovely reservoirs, we have lots of lovely water, whereas we also operate in the Essex and Suffolk region, and the story is very, very different there. But again, we do long-term planning to make sure that we actually have the right level of resources for the UK. So we are in a good place, but we need to work in partnership with our customers to make sure that we're doing this as well as we can. And then the other thing is the changing expectations. So in terms of customer experience, people want everything now. They want information like you're getting your pizza delivered or something else. So we need to make sure that when you're in touch with Northumbrian Water, that we can give you those products and services in a way that you want, that's in tune with how you want it, and that we're using digital technology to really make that happen. Also, what's acceptable now is very different to what was acceptable then. So you can't fail to have seen over the summer all of the press about river water and bathing water quality. So as a sector, we're working really, really hard to make sure that we are using design and technology to right some of the wrongs that have been going on. Again, this is a water sector. We're all brothers and sisters in the UK here, so I won't single anybody out, but huge challenges. But this is really exciting for me, because it means when we have big things like this happening, this is when change can happen, and this is when change is needed. So this is why I have such an exciting job. But we could come up with the best ideas, the most brilliant solutions out there. But without people, we would not be able to do anything. really nothing. We wouldn't have the ideas, we wouldn't have the ability to do anything. So that's why we've now made innovations one of our core values within the business. And this is something that we really are wanting to spread across all of the different directorates and functions. Remembering that we have a workforce of about 3,500 people, and about a third of those people are working out in the fields. They are digging roads, they are mending pipes, they are reading meters, and they might not think that they're very innovative, or they might not think that they're part of this journey, where they absolutely are, because they'll have insights that will be able to inform the right solutions. So it's really important that we engage with everybody in the business to be part of this journey. And in order to do this, we've created this group called the Innovation Ambassadors. And when I joined, it was about 14 people who were in quite senior roles. Now we have over 95 right across the business, all different levels, all different directorates, all different roles, even procurement, that are the people that I used to try and find an innovative solution to get around. Now they are my best buddies, and that is how things get done. But it is really important that we have this way to engage. They get reward because they have recognition for putting in time. They get development and skill opportunity. We bring the outside in, which is really important when you're part of a big organisation. You can often stare at your navel a little bit and not get outside, which is why these events are so important to really get some fresh air and some new thinking. We also make it really inclusive. So I'm going to come on to the festival in a minute, but one of my colleagues actually came to me and said, I don't like your festival. And you know what? It was a little light bulb moment for me, because for me, it actually really works. It's all neon, it's bright, it's really excitable. Whereas he is a different type that actually wants to be more reflective, do things a little bit slower. So actually, that comment that he made to me was actually one of the best things that we've done, because now we've got a whole series of work looking at how we can better include everybody's different thinking types, how they want to engage, to make sure that we are actually harnessing all the brilliant people that we have, not only in our business, but also in our network and supply chains. It's very important. And we need money. So the thing that brings people to my meeting is that I have a pot of money to do proof of concept work, and then we vote on these as a democratic partnership, and then this actually makes sense for small projects growing. But money is generally not a problem. There are actually lots of funds out there, and actually our regulator has got a pot of £200 million for our sector, and Northumbrian Water has actually won the most number of bids and brought in over £12.5 million of funding to extend the innovation work that we do. So we're really excited by what's going on in the sector at the moment. And then we've also created Innovation University, because it's really important to give people the knowledge and skills to be able to do this and really invest in people, and hopefully make people have a thirst for knowledge and make people curious, and that definitely works out. So this is just a few of the ways in which we want to engage with the outside world. We're really aware that we do not have all of the answers to the problems that we have, and we very, very much want to work with our supply chain and with others, academia, to really crack some of these tough challenges that we've had. And we're very aware that doing it alone is not going to cut it. So that's why we have an open innovation approach. The Innovation Festival I'm going to come on to in a little minute, which is one of our vehicles for actually engaging with the outside world. And then also within our own sector, there are also some great collaborations going in. I couldn't believe it. I've been in the role now about 4 years. And when I came in, I couldn't believe that all of the other 19 water companies had the same problems as me, yet we weren't talking and we weren't sharing. We leave tables next to each other. So if I'm winning, I'm not going to tell him over there what we're doing. That's the wrong behaviour in a sector that really needs to pull together. So actually, there's a lot of great stuff now going on. And I think that the innovation funding is also driving the right behaviours there, which is excellent. So now on my favourite topic, the Innovation Festival, and talk about design being a change. I think that people have the mindset that you have to have a grumpy face to do business, and you can't smile and have fun. Well, we decided that absolutely is not going to cut it for Northumbrian Water, and we've now run 6 innovation festivals. The first one, it's fair to say, was a prototype. It was the brainchild of my boss. We run design sprints and data hacks in our business anyway. And we thought, why don't we do this on a large scale? So we'll run 6 simultaneously, an outdoor event. So we have Gosford Park Racecourse, and then we throw in all the good bits of the British Summertime Festival, music, poetry, you name it, we have it. And it's an amazing event. But what we found from running this event and actually running it at the racecourse is that when you can wear your own clothes and you're outside in a kind of like non-working environment, it absolutely democratizes innovation. So it doesn't matter whether you're a student, a CEO, a customer, or whoever you are, your voice is valued and everybody is very much valued. And you know what happens when people laugh and have fun and have the opportunity to have conversations that they would never normally have? Brilliant things happen. So we knew that we were onto a formula that worked really, really well. So some of these pictures just kind of typify the kind of feel that you probably wouldn't expect to have from a water board from the northeast of England. So as I said, we've run now for the last 6 years. So for the first 3, we grew and grew and grew, as you can imagine, growing our ambition, growing the amazing things that came out of the festival. But then the pandemic hit. So we were planning to go in that July, and we were coming up thinking now, so we'll put it out till September. How naive were we thinking it would all be over by then? So then we decided that, you know what, nothing's going to change here. So we could have had a year off, put our feet up, you know, get the technologies in that we were already working on. But no, we decided that we would really challenge ourselves, and we actually flipped it to a totally digital format. So digitizing all of the brilliant things about our event. And you know what happened? When we opened our digital doors on that first morning, I can honestly say we did not have a clue what was going to happen. But what did happen was flipping amazing in that we have over 40 countries during our sprints. So now it was a global entity. So we're not ever going to close those digital doors again. Because also talking about the inclusive innovation piece, it means that people who perhaps couldn't travel for whatever reason to Newcastle, who wouldn't want to come to Newcastle? Surprising but true. Maybe too scared, who knows? It meant that people could engage in a different way. So this is something we're going to keep definitely part of the event. And then on 2021, we went hybrid, really difficult, and actually almost more difficult, as we're seeing today, than actually being all online, because then you've got so many different leaders doing it. But we still did it, and we challenged ourselves. As a non-digital, as the water board, this is what we did. And then we came back with fire in our bellies for 2022. And wow, were people hungry for being back together again? And again, the outputs and the event was absolutely amazing. So has anybody actually been to the Innovation Festival? We have some hands. We have some hands. Well, hopefully the next time I'm here, everybody's hand will be up. Week of July 10th next year. Don't go on holiday. So these are just some figures for those of you who likes the stats and facts. So over the 6 years, you know, over 15,000 people coming along. Really important to me. That over 2,000 of our employees have been involved. Great way to change the culture, which we're really starting to see the benefit of now. We've sprinted and hacked on over 150 different topics. You'd think we probably only work on leakage, flooding, and customer experience. Well, there are so many nuances and so many things that we can actually work on that the number is still growing. And I said we're really proud now to be open to the world, so over 40 countries. But then it's the other sector bit that's really exciting, because do you know what? I can talk to the water company any time of the week. But what I can't do is talk to the businesses like yourselves who come from different places. So this is the thing that we really want to do, to inject some new thinking, because building on what Rich has done, we actually have doctors, because we also do keyhole surgery in our work, because digging up the roads is pain and really disruptive. So if we can do laparoscopies like in the road, that's exactly what we want to do. And indeed, that's something that we've been doing. We put stents in there, just like you do with heart surgery. So there's inspiration everywhere that we can bring into our sector. Okay, so again, very briefly, we have had hundreds of brilliant projects out, but probably the one that I would probably want to talk about the most is our NUAR project. So this is a way in which any of the utilities can access information when they're about to dig up the road as to what's there. You would not believe there's about 1 million utility strikes a year. It can kill people, it definitely injures people, it definitely causes all of you bother when a road gets cut off and you can't get there. So very annoying on so many levels. And now we've worked with the government to actually create this digitized map as well. It's a bit like Snapchat, because obviously it's really, really precious information that we would not want everybody having. So you apply for access for a certain amount of space. You then get it, you can't screenshot it, you have it while you're doing the work, and then it's gone, just like a Snapchat. So brilliant technology to be able to bring that to life, and will actually be game changing. They reckon it's worth 2.6 billion to UK PLC, and that came out of our Innovation Festival. But the thing that really made it happen was our ability to actually get the right people in the room and to have that right conversation. And had I have not trapped them in a tent for a week, it might never have happened. There you go. So I guess all of this is about so what. So yes, we go and have fun. It's a nice event to do. But if it didn't actually have any material outcome, it would not be worth anything. So our innovation pipeline is worth more than 43,000 if everything works, which it doesn't for innovation. But you know what? We're cool with that, and we know that that's the way that it is, and that's on an annual basis. The partnerships that we've created at the festival has actually gone on and secured external funding, which means that we can do even more innovation work and we can solve even more challenging projects. The culture of innovation is growing within our business, which again is absolutely key. So we'll be able to make that change faster. And do you know what? Our change in Northumberland is also rubbing off on other businesses, which is just fantastic. I think we could say we're leading. Other people, even in the water companies, say that actually we're not doing a bad job. So it's my job to make sure that we still keep on leading, and that means that's a big job because it's hard to be on the top. Inclusivity, absolutely key. All of the different vectors we're looking at, because this is going to be again something really important, and very importantly, putting the North East on the map. So we work with loads of different businesses. We have an obligation to spend 60p every pound in our regions. So we want the businesses locally to thrive as well. So please come and be a part of our Innovation Festival. Everybody is welcome. Your personal invitation, we feed you, it's for free. It's really fun. We have brilliant celebrity speakers and all the rest of it. Very unexpected event. And I think the most exciting thing is that actually you don't know what might happen or what conversation you might have that might lead to something brilliant. And that's the best bit. So please, the invitation is there should you be free. Thank you very much. Thank you for bedding that technology. Much appreciated.
And I've had the pleasure and privilege of being at quite a few of the festivals, and they are fantastic. And it's interesting, it's a similar journey we've been on where when the pandemic hit, we just moved everything online, and that was easy.
Yeah.
Hybrid is really necessary ahead, but it's the benefits far outweigh the difficulties. And
Because it's great to have the people online today.
it is.
I know it's not the same experience as being in the room, but still, you know, hopefully people can still be inspired and get excited to make a connection.
So does anyone have a question or a comment or anything really for Angela? And we'll try again with you guys on Zoom if anyone has something you want to comment on. Richard.
How do you, brilliant talk by the way, how do you measure innovation within?
That is a very, very good question, because I'm a scientist. So if you can't measure it, you don't know if you're getting better. So we actually have a whole set of metrics around the amount of ideas, how fast they go across the stage gates, number of people involved. You can imagine all of the metrics that we have out at the Innovation Festival. Obviously value. So we must have about 18 different metrics that we closely track to make sure that we're going in the right direction. But it is really important.
I'm really interested in kind of the culture you've got of like political collaboration. I'm wondering how like you sort of go over those early hurdles to that and just
I think certainly one of the first things that I did when I took the job was make sure that the CEO Heidi and the lead team were all on board, because there's no point trying to change culture and embed innovation in a culture where you have not got support. And they absolutely walk the talk. So if you've ever heard Heidi Mockman speak anywhere, she is absolutely on it. They all at the festival, all accessible for everybody to have a talk. They absolutely get involved. And then the other bit then was obviously working with the whole organisation. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Derek Sievers How to Create a Movement TED talk. If you haven't, it's Terry can pass it on. That's been my inspiration. So this is all about a crazy guy dancing in a field at a festival. He's on his own. By the end of the video, we've got the whole field on. And that's kind of how I've seen my mission at Northumbrian Water. So I've got about 95 up dancing at the moment. I've got a bit of a journey to go, but believe you me, by the time I'm done, everybody will be up dancing.
He was dancing for a long time though, wasn't he?
He was.
Everybody found him.
It's an amazing video, and the way that Derek talks through it is really interesting.
Anyone, Matt, do you want to try again? Oh, I can't promise anything, but we'll give it a go.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Right, I'm just going to cycle through the available sound devices on here. Try again.
Can you hear us? Hello, 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 hello.
Keep talking, anything?
Can you hear
No,
us?
sorry. Well,
You'll have to type your question in. Happy to answer.
yeah, put some in the chat, Matt, and
Phil's gonna have a
we'll
question.
sort something out. Sorry about that. Steve.
I was really interested when you talked about the fact that you kind of broke down barriers with cross-sector collaboration. I think a lot of us, well, certainly in my industry, your old company, for
Yeah.
example, wouldn't be chatting to Unilever
Yeah.
ordinarily. How that's still, I know it's slightly different in the sector that you're in, but how have you built some of those bridges and how has that become more collaborative?
I think the change that we need to make as a sector, and as I highlighted on one of the slides there, we have some absolutely massive challenges and we have a lot of pressure on us to really improve on some of the areas like leakage, flooding, etc. And the only way that we can do that is really by working together. But it's all about people. So we set up a working group with all the water companies in that had to write a 2050 strategy. And we did write the strategy. But the most important thing that happened was relationships were formed during the writing of that strategy. And when you do business with people, and if you like somebody, you're more likely to open up and to work together. And then also the regulator has set up this innovation fund, and that has really, really engaged the conversation and really taken it to a different level. So it has been a bit of a slow burn, but it's night and day versus where it was, which is brilliant. And then we can work like that because we're not in direct competition with each other. So when you're a Unilever or a Procter & Gamble, I know how I used to feel. If you said Unilever a couple of years ago, I'd have been shaking and like a little bit giddy, because you kind of, this is how it is like when it's like a corporate business. But there are brilliant examples now when people are coming to tackle really tough humanitarian or big societal challenges that actually people will leave their branding at the door and actually just roll their sleeves up, which I hope that this is going to be more the part of the future that I want to be part of, because I think the rules of the game now are different. We've got some challenges that we all need to pull together. We can't be in our silos.
About sustainability, but we're not going to solve that.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question from Phil at Teesside about are you doing any work around hydroelectric power?
We do. Energy is a huge topic at the moment. You can imagine that that's one of our biggest bills coming in, and we're trying to do everything that we can in order to minimise those bills. And hydroelectric, because we have quite a lot of water, is obviously something top of mind. But it's all about whether the business case stacks up. So I think that we've been able to do it in a few cases, but not at a wide scale. There are perhaps some of the more effective ways in which we can generate energy than that particular mechanism. But thank you for the question.
Thanks, Angela. Will,
I think it was more about your question.
Okay.
Quite interesting, but based on that as well, you were mentioning earlier about how certain things have arisen as say government has kind of removed certain red tape. You know, how do you find that relationship between policy and design? Because I'm currently working in more of a healthcare area, and the amount of red tape and policy that I have to kind of like tackle between the Department of Health and then also the UKVI,
Yeah.
it can be very frustrating, especially when you've got two policies that just knuckle each other in the face. So how do you find that relationship between being a designer and then also someone who's having to follow policy, I guess?
Yeah, it's a tough one because my natural nature is a freestyler, and I ask for forgiveness rather than for permission, which in a regulated business is not really a very good thing. So as with my friends in procurement, I'm now very good friends with, we also have brilliant conversations now with our regulator, because that's the only way in which we can drive change. And when they're aware of the facts and the impact that their policies are having. So one of the ones that we have is that we cannot put anything into a line water pipe that doesn't have a certain regulation, which is good for all of you, because it means that you might not be poisoned, which is a very good thing. So we have to take our responsibility we need that regulation for obvious reasons. It's really important. But what we're doing now is the regulator is helping us actually create more laboratories that can do this, so then we can go faster, because that sort of thing kills little businesses when we're trying to work on new technologies. So I guess it's all about the dialogue. So we're good looking in the health space. It's perhaps a little bit more a bit of a different conversation.
let's finally on Julie on Zoom is they're having a Green Futures Challenge with schools, and wondered whether some of your innovation ambassadors might like to get involved in that in some way.
If they want to drop me a little line as to what it is, then we'd be very happy to see. Could even be part of our festival, because we have a huge STEM aspect to the festival. We've got about 2,000 children planning to be involved this year in various things. So.
Well, I'll be sharing Angela's and Paul and Richard's contact details, so by all means get in touch afterwards. But Angela, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm now to welcome Paul from the EMA Group, or rather one of their new incarnations, Bill. Paul's travelled from Sheffield for us to see you today. So Paul, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Paul Howell, and hello to everybody online. Great to be here. I'm as terrified as you. We were at a wedding before last with my youngest son, 13. His cousin asked him to get up and dance. And when you were talking about being the one up there dancing, it just brought to mind my son's comment when he turned through and said, "I don't do dancing." Well, maybe we need to dance, but maybe I'm not quite as able to dance publicly. So I guess this is a little bit, from my point of view, a bit of a story of kind of the story of a career overlay and the story of a business journey. My background originally in logistics, then in organisation change, with my master's in brand crisis management, worked for Tunstall Healthcare on the exec team, got into organisation change, which pushed me into innovation, which made me think I want to do that. I really want to do that. So we started AIM Group in the late 1990s. We got into 3D printing back then. It wasn't called 3D printing then. But we got into it. We bought a fantastic machine from America, which was a pile of junk. Never built a good part in all the time we owned it. But it got us into the industry, and you know, however many years on now, we're still in that industry. AIM 3D, significant engine of our group, and we've just put in the latest 2 machines. One with, well, the largest is 800 by 800 by 600 build size, so it's pretty much one of the biggest that's available in the UK at the moment, in a particular technology. And so that's part of the journey. The other part of the journey is back in the late 90s, we got involved in the upstream process of design. We pulled in pulled the team together, a significant number from Newcastle, who 1 or 2 have now flown the nest and are doing great things with American organisations, but AIM Design was built over the years. One of the functions that we did was we built a design team, and we became the design engine really for a group within Procter & Gamble called Create, organised and run by a really good friend of mine, Will Schoenmakers, who's now Global Head of Manufacturing and Consumer Product with PA Consulting. And I guess back then we were doing what you would describe now as lean startup, before we had the language for lean startup. It was just, what about if we try this? What about if we do this? Can we make this quicker? What's the design process as a result of? And then I look back now and I think actually a significant amount of the engine of that activity was in a commercial consumer organisation driving product sales. And I look back now and think there was a significant amount of that was contributing to single-use plastic, etc., etc. And you know, that's part of our journey. That's part of the design journey. That's part of our industry journey over these past years. And the world changes, and we need to respond to that change. You know, back somewhere out there, my name's on a patent for a disposable chisel blade. Thankfully, it never got made.
But you look back and you think a great idea, consumer driving idea, fantastic, we love it, and now we hate it. And so we as an organisation have really gone through a significant journey of soul searching, coming to terms with who we are, recognising some of the things that we have done. One of our activities over the years has been incubating businesses that we get deeply embedded with. So we got involved in lone worker alarms. More recently, I've ended up as CEO of Arquella, which is a tech intervention into social healthcare. It matters when you start to develop products like that. When you start to realise, you know, getting towards the end of a career, what's the next 10 years going to be? Am I going to be doing something that really matters? And then for myself and Ian, my business partner, it started us thinking, what does it mean for the rest of the organisation? How do we change and how do we continue to be relevant? And so what I want to just talk through a little bit is the journey that we went on. It wasn't anywhere near as neat and structured and flash as the presentation makes it look, but it's some of the thinking. It's where we got to. And I suppose the starting point is really deeply reflecting on the world as it is and not the world as it was. And at the end of the day, we live, and I think, you know, we could have huge discussions around the economic value of consumerism as a model, capitalist model, capitalism as a concept. I would argue it's brought more people globally out of poverty than any other structure. However, it also has brought some of the greatest problems. And so we are seeing the shift which organisations need to respond to. Consumers no longer demand products. Consumers now demand products that respond to social, environmental and economic change challenges that we face. That's where we are. It's not where we were. It's not where we as an organisation were. It's not the world in which we were born and grew up in as an organisation. It's not even the world that I grew up in from a career point of view. And yet, responding and seeing that change, I think as drivers of change and drivers of design gives us a great opportunity to be really instrumental in the change that we want to see. There's a shift. We called it a shift from exception to expectation. There was a time when there was a small number of people who cared. I'm old enough to remember when King Charles, as he now is, was ridiculed for his attitude towards the environment. And now globally, 85% of people have indicated that those very issues has been part of their purchasing decision making. That's the world that is changing. That's dramatic change. 85% in the past 5 years have made that part of our purchase decision making. And I would guess that pretty much all of us in the room on a spectrum have made those decisions. Some of us are more committed to it. I don't say none of us in this room are completely oblivious to it. That is the change that has gone on. Which means that the products that we're buying are changing for good. That insight, when we sat down, you know, the mucky journey of thinking about us as a business, throwing ideas on the table, working through the journey, actually bringing in an external consultant, Ralph Ardill. Some of you will know Ralph was fantastic in being that outside voice, which I think every change process needs to a greater or lesser extent. It's what we do as design teams, helping us to see that there are really 3 areas: environmental, obviously, inclusivity. Inclusivity of design within products is now part of the journey. Ethical changes, creating products without negative consequence. That is such a high ambition. And the reality is there are very, very few products that can truly say they have no negative consequences. But are we on a trajectory that reduces the negative consequences in what we are developing? Are we as an organisation supporting organisations who are involved in industries which we don't agree with their main focus of industry? Yes, we are. And we're involved with them because they recognise that they don't agree with their main focus of industry. And they're going on a journey of change, which means that they will be something different in the future from what they are now. And so that ethical consequence is a driver that we see significant. It's consumer revolution. Numbers count, data counts in the journey of change. I'm more of a touchy feeling person. I like to think about ideas, and my business colleague Ian is give me the numbers, and it's fantastic because he holds me to account, and I stop him from just drifting into this simplistic world where you never do anything. What a disparaging comment to all of you number-driven people. No, he holds me to account, I hold him to account. 66%, this is real numbers, 66% of shoppers say they consider sustainability when making a purchase. I know that when I was young, I would say that if that was beyond double figures, I would be surprised. 71% of consumers say that putting profit before people will lose trust in that brand forever. That is a massively insightful thought. The buyers of our products, or the buyers of the products that we're involved in creating, will have attitudes towards the organisation that they buy that product from, on the basis of their attitude towards profitability. How do we work through that in a capitalist model? In all organisations which are driven effectively by P&L. Even public sector structures have the principles of P&L underneath them. 122 billion was spent in the UK in 2020 in sustainable and ethical products. I love that number because it gives a glint of hope that the consumer is changing the journey. I guess I look back and say part of our journey was driven by that driving numbers, responsibility. And I hate to confess, but I will confess, it's important to be open that we're being forced to change by consumers. And that's great, because actually when we make that turn, the opportunities that we have from a creative point of view to reinforce that change are massive. People want change, but they don't know how to execute it. We realize that change is a great thing, and we know how to execute it. What a virtuous cycle we end up in. And I would argue that this is across every industry and market, to a greater or lesser extent. Every industry is affected by this in some way or another. Brand management, perception of end users with regards to your brand means that it is almost impossible to be engaged in any kind of public-facing organisation without being aware of these issues. I'm going to jump through that one because are we sharing the presentation? Yeah, great. Share the presentation. If you love the numbers, that's really helpful to look at. But just one or two points, and really speaking into something that Richard was recognising. 4.5 million people aged 65 plus have never used the internet. But that's going to change massively, dramatically. Sub-Saharan Africa are making a technology step. They're not going through the line telephony journey, they're going direct to mobile. All of those kind of changes means that the world is going to change at a dramatic rate in terms of adoption of technology, but we are in a tipping point. We are in that liminal space where we have an old order that we need to care for and manage when a new order will explode onto the scene. And creative, ethical, conscious design recognizes that and doesn't just jump to the new order, in my view. The stakes are high. 3.8 billion was lost in revenue for UK brands boycotted by consumers on ethical or social concerns. It's a 2020 report. That's big numbers, and that's exciting to me because it means that actually our capitalist model is working. Because when we lose 3.8 billion pounds worth of revenue, things change. Because we don't want to lose 3.8 billion pounds worth of revenue. We want to do the things that matter. Let's not get into a political discussion. Go on. The opportunities therefore are huge. 88% of consumers want brands to help them live sustainably. And 1/3 of consumers are willing to pay a premium for sustainable products. We do it because we virtue signal. We virtue signal. We create a status of who I am in the network of people that I spend time with. And so in certain environments, we will wear certain sustainable footwear because we want to virtue signal that I'm on that journey. The beauty of that is it has a ripple down effect, that the more progressive value-add brands become conscious of that virtue signaling, it ripples down into the rest of the economy. It makes that change happen. Why? Because of the 3.8 billion. Who's answering the call? This looks like we did a really kind of neat journey of analysis of companies out there. It wasn't anything like that. It was what you think. Anybody who really grabs you to go in. And so I'm kind of proud that we said Patagonia before the owner of the business gave his company away to a trust where the profits from Patagonia in the future are sustaining climate change. I mean, that is extraordinary. That's just mind blowing. But they down detail level, you buy a Patagonia product and you can send it back to them and have it repaired. Have it repaired at really incredible competitive prices. A certain manufacturer up in the northeast where it's actually cheaper to buy a new one than it is to have it repaired. That is not where we need to be. We need to be in the Patagonian model where sustainability, we nail our colours to the mast and we will buy it because I can have it repaired. What happens then? Virtue signalling comes in. I stand in front of everybody else, although I'm not today, with a Patagonia gilet on, and everybody says, that's the kind of person that really cares for the environment, and the trickle down continues to happen. Therefore, really interesting company, responsible materials sourcing, but more importantly, advocating workers' welfare. In consumer electronics, that's a really important thing. How successful they will be, I don't know, but what they will be is an engine of pointing the finger at the mass consumer electronics manufacturing organizations, where the power of the consumer will start to say things about how the products are made. Lush, loves Lush. I have no sense of smell. I literally none. In fact, last Sunday I went to see a specialist consultant, and he said, "You must, camera up the nose, all that jazz, horrible, literally zero sense of smell." He said to me, "You must have some sense of smell." Why? When you wear cologne. Now that's only from the wife. And it's also because I'm paranoid about smelling. Lush is great. I remember 10 years ago when I walked past a Lush shop, I could smell it from 200 yards. But more importantly, look at the commitment that they have made from written into the DNA of the organization is the nature of the products. Adidas. I think it's really interesting. Major global brand, all sorts of issues, challenges around the periphery, and yet they have a commitment to creating products used from ocean plastic. Is that cynical? I think the step change where I think it's deeper, and I'm not a shareholder in Adidas, so don't know anything about their product journey other than being an observer. I think the fact that they've gone into a collaborative product journey with Allbirds, who will do everything to avoid any kind of brand problem with their ethical commitment. The fact that those two organisations have entered into a joint branding venture says to me that maybe Adidas commitment is deeper than virtue signalling and greenwashing. I hope it is, because if it is, they will win. What's the common thread? And this is where it really started to hit for us as a journey. All of those organisations understand that we want products that benefit stakeholders, not just shareholders. That's the difference. We've driven product design for years based on shareholder value, and actually we're now being driven into a change where stakeholders is a higher priority. And so that pushes me from my way of thinking, I'm not a designer. The team that we've got are a million times better than me. I'm really interested in what does that mean as an organization? What do we need to become? How do we think? How do we live in a world where profit is still a requirement? We can't do anything without profit. I'm really interested in the comment that you made. The business case has to stack up. The business case has to stack up. The challenge to that is Amazon's business case didn't stack up for 12 years. Wind generated power didn't stack up for 20 years. And yet we keep pushing into it. Why? Because ultimately, when you push into something which is good for all stakeholders, product, people, planet, and profit, it becomes viable as a business case. And that's a really interesting journey. And it's forced us into a way of thinking. We've been really influenced now by the idea of conscious capitalism, where we start to think about profits as a consequence rather than profits as a driver. And it's the deep belief that when we treat profits as a consequence and focus on all of the other good things, that because of what we see in the consumer base, then profits will be the consequence of that change. And so it's a shift for us from corporate capitalism, profit over consequence, a primacy of shareholder value in economic terms, to a primacy of stakeholder value, which is ultimately, in my way of thinking, better for the shareholders in terms of a long-term sustainable business. It's a new way of thinking, and it's become a driver for A&E. We wrote this manifesto and we said we can't carry on being A&E design. We're going to build something different.
And so we built. Not so much because we want to say, you know, look at our new organisation, but it's mostly for us, actually. It's mostly for us to put a line in the sand and say there is a change that is taking place within the organisation with a language for the outer world that we believe makes sense. And so we move from opportunity, from profit to for good, insight, human-centered to purpose-led, ideas from solving a problem to making an impact. There's subtle differences, but when you think differently in that way, the change is significant from design, which is linear, to circular. Circular in terms of whole life product journeys. You know, did we think whole life product journeys in the early 2000s when we were doing some amazing, really fantastic FMCG products that drove profit significantly? Were we thinking circular? No. No. Did we do great work for shareholders? Yes. However, now we are thankfully being forced to change. And actually for us, it's resonating with what we feel, the change that we want to make, the people that we want to be, producing from market to end of life. Which is why we built Phil, why we've called ourselves something different. We are a different person, is the way we like to think about it. Do we have the whole kind of back catalogue, which we now how do you work as an organization that in the past few years we've gone from literally designing the rocket engine to designing products that are really effective in the medical environment or in the FMCG world with sustainability, or even child feeding cups that mean something because of all of this to the buyers of the product. And our view now is very different. When we start to bring that kind of thinking, we think that we can impact our customers with a different kind of excellence. We think we can bring real value. We talked earlier about the value of being disruptive in the early process, thinking differently in the early stage, where sustainability is on the table from day one. In organizations where very often people are not empowered to do that, and where innovation starts to have purpose-driven incentive rather than profit-driven incentive. You can have a look at that if you really want to. And that's us. Thank you.
Paul, take a little bit. I remember when I joined ICI in the late 80s, we had a big meeting for like 100 odd people who just joined, and the head of R&D got up and said, "Oh, we do this. We have labs over there, and we do this, and then we have these semi-tech plants, and then we do blah blah blah." And the end result of all of that is we increase shareholder value. Yes. And I thought, that is really, that's what this is all about. It was such a massive letdown. Yeah. And that difference with shareholders and stakeholders is critical.
And yet, you know, most organizations, public organizations, are driven by the value of their stock. And so shareholder value is still driven and written into most businesses. And I think the change is coming from underneath. And honestly, for me, the 3.8 billion lost spend is what's going to make the difference. Because it ultimately is good for shareholders to think of.
So, anyone like to comment, question? Yes, Richard.
So that was brilliant, really, really inspirational. So we've been kind of on a journey as well for a number of years, and on this is more of a observational comment really. So probably about 75% of what we do is medical devices. Yeah. And the NHS wrote a white paper a few years ago about single use. And as a result, the NHS have got a big inertia in terms of avoiding single-use plastic, which is a really great initiative. The problem is that in clinical procedures, there are very good instances where you cannot reuse devices, and single-use plastic is, at the moment, the only way of doing it. So whilst we've been looking at bioplastics and engaging with clinical teams, the economics just don't stack up. The problem is that we've got policymakers that are banging the drum on this, and we're working with clients who are manufacturers of medical devices that we think in 2 or 3 years' time are going to hit a real buffer, and there's going to be a real disconnect. So I think it's a great initiative, but there's a practical example there as to where there's a disconnect. And the thing that bothers me is how do we resolve it? Because there isn't really a bioplastic out there at the moment. We're looking really hard that can be safe for use, and reusable. But the other thing is, if it's a medical device and it's carrying out a medical procedure, even if it were reusable, then the implications are who's going to check that the device is fit for purpose for reuse, and how many reuses does it get? And I think this is a kind of an example where there's a bit of a to me, it's a real challenge. I'm not quite sure how we get out of it.
I think the step change there is for organisations that supply those products to stop thinking about that thing as the product. That's the product in terms of what's used, but ultimately the product is a way whereby they engage in the full circle. That they involve themselves in the back end of the disposal and the reuse, and then suddenly, and that for me is the kind of you drive a policy which makes the change, which means that suddenly an organisation that's fleet of foot and comes along and says, well, okay, we know it's single-use plastic, but we get involved in this and we do it this way, and we're working with a glass company that they make glass, and they don't make window frames, they don't make plastic and aluminium and all of that kind of thing, but they're recognising now that if they get in that final stage of the full circular process, including the aluminium and plastic, then the value of their glass in terms of a purchasing choice becomes much stronger.
Can I just add to that? There is another school of thought in that perhaps we shouldn't see plastic as the root of all evil. So for my sins, I had a plastics manufacturing business for 10 years. But there are, Terry, you held a conference, was it in Seam? I can't remember now, but it was in the old ICI plant. They developed a technology to take certain plastics back to its constituent parts into oil. And they did set up, and they are still setting up, I believe it's a long time coming through, but they have a system whereby they actually take the different polymers, providing they're separated, which is another issue, but they've got intensive, huge industrial autoclaves, so they can clean everything and then recycle it. So we can still do things with single-use plastic, but like you say, it's the full circle. It's understanding that it's not the evil. There is other things that can be done with it.
Yes, and the incentive to actually become a provider that works out how to separate the different plastic types at the back end of the usage cycle. We'll do that. We'll deliver you the part, but don't think of the part as the product. Think of the full service. So I think we could easily see a journey towards plastic as a service as opposed to plastic as a product. I think that's a really interesting concept.
There was a question for Andrew on Zoom, on whose behalf I'm going to ask it, about worrying about whether if the shift to sustainable design is driven by consumers, now the consumers have less to spend, is that going to affect that shift, and all of those high ideals will go out the window and people buy cheaper stuff again?
Yes and no, in my view. I think I've been through, AME's journey has been through 3 recessions now, and we come out the other side, and we've still got the same problems on the other side of it. Will it make it more difficult in the short term? Yes, but equally in the long term, the companies that get really creative in this difficult time will be the winners in the bounty days beyond, in my view.
David, we'll have to leave it
It's a
there.
great talk, really inspirational and thought-provoking. I think you've articulated a lot of what we all feel, but you've got some numbers to back it up, which is always good. Quick comment, the founder of Patagonia, he's called Yvon Chouinard.
Yeah.
He wrote a great book called Let My People Go Surfing a number of years ago, which is always worth a look if anybody's interested. It's really great.
Wow.
His philosophy in there, he talks about industrial design as a practice, as a thing about creating the best products. I did get a hoodie repaired actually for free. The zip was broken. I just got in touch and sent me a label. I sent it off. Took a few weeks, but yeah, brand new zip, hoodie's good as ever. So
And your allegiance to the brand,
strengthened cause.
the change that makes is dramatic.
There's a little story in the book about somebody who bought one of the first clothing products they ever made.
Yeah.
Was this pair of baggy climbing shorts. We call them baggies.
Yeah.
And the customer sent them back in after many years and said, "These are the best shorts I've ever had. My favorite shorts in the entire world. Please, can you fix them?" So the story goes that they looked at them and they were literally falling to pieces. It's not, they're literally not even thread was still together.
Yeah.
So they initially wrote back to the customer and said, "Look, really sorry, we'll give you a credit, you can go into new ones." The customer said, "No, if you can't repair them, just send them back. As they are, I'll just." So they went another layer, and one of the employees found some of the original fabric we still had from that year, the exact same color, the same fabric. They could dug out the old pattern, they remade the shorts again for that customer. We sent them to them for free
Wow. Wow.
with the originals. Just I think your point's really strong. I think there's some examples of really great things happening like this rise in these B corporations,
Yeah,
which are these ethical businesses. And
Yeah.
occasionally, actually, the last few weeks, we've been using Gusto for Fox Meal, which are really great. I mean, they're really good. And they're a B Corp, and I think there is a growing percentage of people, as your numbers suggest, that people who actually do care about this, and the ones who are able to afford those choices will make them when they can. And I think there's some hope.
There's lots of moments where you see it really over many years, early 2000, my own son has autism and just couldn't cope with labels inside of his t-shirts. It was only three or four at the time. And we found that George did t-shirts without labels, and it was so amazing. And my wife go to letter in to them whether they still do it. It went throughout the organisation, and they at that time committed to never putting labels in the necklines of their t-shirts. How long that sticks, I don't know. Whether I haven't been into, I don't buy small t-shirts, but that's the kind of thing that really engages with clients because it actually cares about.
There's a great line of books by that called Michael Neumeier, who's a brand guy, he wants to Zag. And it's about how in a crowded marketplace, how do you differentiate yourself, how do you be different? And one of this, right, we're going to be B Corp, we're going to be sustainable, ethical, and that's, I think, more and more people making this choice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is it a really, really quick one?
It's just a funny story.
A really quick one.
Yeah, just an observation, one of your slides about getting people on board with the idea. Debbie Simpson, Northeast Big Family. I was at Horton Feast the other night and walking through the crowds and the fireworks. A little kid probably about 2. Mommy, can I have that lightsaber, flashing lights? And yes, son, you know what Mommy thinks about plastic? And straight away he said, Mommy, it's not plastic, but of course it is. And she says, well, if you don't buy that, I'll put £5 into your pocket money this weekend. So little kid this big, yeah, okay, Mom. So conversations,
Right, well, again, thanks for that, Paul, that was brilliant. As I said before, if you want to have a chat with Paul afterwards or drop a line, I'm sure you'd love to hear from you. You mentioned Patagonia, but also, I don't know how many of you know that Cavally, based in Gateshead, who are the makers of Primula cheese, they're owned by a trust and all their profits go to charity. So they don't have shareholders, they have stakeholders. So every time you square a bit of cheese on your rich cracker, something's better. Right, we did have Vicky from Mad Digital. It involves unplugging that thing, and I really don't want to. So Vicky's got some really cool tech, some immersive tech stuff that is in relation to some of the things we talked about. So she's going to do a demo when we're finished. Is that all right? Yep. So we've got that table up in there and an iPad. And so if you want to see that in action, then we'll do that at the end. Okay, but a huge thank you to all of our speakers. It's been brilliant. I'm sure we're going to take things away and be thinking about this stuff for a long time to come. It has been live streamed, so you can watch it again on YouTube, and hopefully I'll be able to share the slides as well from everyone. So a massive thank you. We've now